the stillness of night and the quiet of our mind, we often find ourselves yearning for stories that both terrify and intrigue. Stories of otherworldly apparitions and unexplained phenomena. But have you ever stopped to wonder, where does it all begin? Welcome to Retraced Echoes.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Retraced Echoes, the podcast where we unravel verified accounts of the supernatural and the unknown. I want everyone to imagine walking down an alley of oaks, the shadows cast by their sprawling branches creating intricate patterns on the ground. What if, hidden within these patterns lies evidence of lives long gone but not forgotten? That leaves a question. Is Oak Alley Plantation merely a historical site, or does it host visitors from beyond our realm? That's the question that today we aim to answer. Now, as always, here at Retraced Echoes, I've committed to presenting you with factual, verified accounts to offer you a comprehensive picture to each of the topics that we discuss. Now, with that said, if you've ever visited Oak Valley and experienced something out of the ordinary, I would love to hear your story. You can contact me through my website or social media platforms. Your account make our exploration all that more exciting. And on top of that, if I like your story, maybe we revisit the location and I tell your story live on air. But for now, let's not waste another minute. A journey through history and the unexplained awaits us. Now, before we venture into the unexplained, I want to take a couple minutes to understand the rich history and the architecture beauty of Oak Alley Plantation. Now, the Oak Alley Plantation, which is located in Louisiana, dates back to the early 19th century. The property was established in 1837 and was primarily a sugarcane plantation. Now, the mansion is perhaps most famous for a stunning alley of 28 evenly spaced oak trees, which honestly is a spectacle in its own right. Now, with such an interesting history, obviously it lends itself into stories. Some are told, some untold, and some perhaps reaching us from dimensions we are yet to fully understand. Now, let's be honest. It's within this rich historical context that reports of unexplained phenomena has emerged. But are these accounts mere fabrications? Or do they offer a glimpse into an unseen world that coexists with our own? I think it's always vital to start with the first encounters. As far back as the late 19th century, there are records of unusual experiences at the plantation. Journal entries from guests and archival letters often mention unexplained noises and shadows where no one stood. But it's not just these accounts from the distant past. Even today, staff members and visitors have reported interesting occurrences, I guess some would say, from unexplainable cold spots in rooms to fleeting glimpses of figures in period clothes. These first-hand experiences add a layer of complexity to the narrative of Oak Alley. When I start doing research, obviously into these locations, one of the first things that I want to look at is how far back are the original sightings. And in this case, Oak Alley Plantation started to gain public attention for those alleged hauntings, and it happened all the way back into the latter half of the 20th century when local media began to feature stories from those who claim to have had paranormal experiences there. Now, the accounts, they've ranged from the chilling to the inexplicable, with some even claiming to have captured photographic evidence, albeit often contested. But at the end of the day, let old Bert be the judge of that one. We've arrived at the moment that you've all been waiting for, the ghost stories of Oak Alley Plantation. Prepare yourself, because these are not mere fables. These stories are based on accounts that have been passed down or shared by those who have had personal experiences at the haunted location. And now, let's dive in. First, let's start with the faceless lady of the second floor. Imagine your very first visit to Oak Alley. You're enthralled by its history, its grandeur. As you climb the stairs to the second floor, you feel the atmosphere change very subtly. It's quieter up here, heavier. You wander down the corridor, your footsteps muffled by the aged carpet. Suddenly, you notice a figure at the end of the hall. It's a woman. She's dressed in an elegant gown that harkens back to the 1800s. Intrigued, you watch her move. You happen to notice that she glides more than she walks, her feet barely touching the ground. Just as you're about to call out, perhaps to compliment her on her period-accurate attire, you notice something that freezes you in its place. Her face. Or rather, I guess the lack of her face. It's as though someone took an eraser to her features, leaving behind a smudged, faceless void. Your heart begins to race. A chill travels down your spine, and just like that, she vanishes. As you later find out, you're not alone. This faceless woman has been reported by multiple visitors and even staff. Her identity and purpose for haunting is unknown. Or perhaps you prefer the story of the unseen servant in the big house. It's twilight, and you find yourself amidst a group of intrigued visitors. Each are eager to unravel the mysteries of the Oak Alley Plantation. As you enter the grand mansion, known as the Big House, the atmosphere again feels like it's charged, as if the very walls are holding on to stories they're yearning to tell. As you continue on, the tour leads you to the grand dining room, a place where once upon a time, elegant dinners and lively conversations, they were just a daily affair. As you listen to the guide narrate a historical anecdote, your ears catch a separate narrative. A distinct clinking of silverware, rhythmic and methodical. The sound is clear, unmistakable, as if the table itself is being set for dinner. Now obviously, curiosity is going to overtake you. You quietly separate from the group, following the clinking noises that's now accompanied by the soft rustling of what sounds like linen napkins. As you round the corner, your eyes land on an immediately set table, crystal glasses, fine china, and polished silverware perfectly aligned. Yet the room, it's utterly empty. No signs of life. More perplexing, the phantom hands that must have just set that table. Now as you return to that group, you're unable to shake that feeling that maybe you just brushed up against a sliver of the past that refuses to fade away. Later, as you discuss your experiences with other visitors, you realize these eerie occurrences is not a unique one. The unsettling sound of phantom dinner preparation has been heard by multiple visitors, painting a vivid picture of an unseen servant still carrying out their duties, perhaps bound by an undying sense of responsibility. Or what about the weeping specter in the quarters? Imagine it. A clear night, the moon's glow bathing Oak Alley in a spectral of light. You find yourself alone, a few steps away from the old slave quarters. You can't help but sense the gravity of the place, the untold suffering that once unfolded here. As you look around, captivated by the haunting beauty of the moonlight reflecting off the crumbling walls, the weight of history sits heavy on your shoulders. It's as if the very air is thick with the residue of countless untold stories, each desperate for an ear willing to listen. But suddenly, the silence is broken. A sound floats to your ears, soft yet distant. It's a woman weeping. The sobbing, it's mournful, deeply laden with a sorrow that seems to transcend time. Your heart tightens. You feel compelled to follow the sound, convinced that perhaps a fellow visitor is in distress. Your footsteps? Well, they became increasingly cautious as you approached the source of the sobs. The crying there is growing louder. The emotional charge behind each weep now has become more palpable. But just as you near one of the ramshackle buildings, the sound ceases abruptly, replaced by an eerie silence. Your eyes dart to the window, half expecting to see someone there, but they reveal nothing, only the eerie darkness within. Now this, for anyone would be both confusing and unnerving. And later you share your experience only to discover that, well, you're not alone. Many have heard the same weeping. A select few have even claimed to seeing a figure in the window dressed in clothing of a bygone era. Her face is often obscured, her identity a mystery. But what about her sorrow? Pretty sure that we can all agree that that is still there. There is still something there that remains as vivid and haunting as ever. These are just a few of the stories that come out of this location. And obviously, there's always theories behind the haunting. Having explored some of the most unsettling encounters and mysterious phenomena reported at Oak Alley Plantation, we've got to delve into the theories that attempt to explain these hauntings. Theories that range from historical interpretations to speculations even involving residual energy. Now, it goes without saying that we cannot talk about Oak Alley without acknowledging its dark history, especially relating to the slavery key. Now, some theories suggest that the immense emotional and physical suffering endured by many has left a lasting impression, perhaps strong enough to manifest in the phenomena that we've discussed today. Now, this is no different than our first podcast when we talked about the Thomas Whaley house. At that location, there was a gentleman by the name of Yankee Jim, and he was hung on the very spot where Thomas Whaley would later build his home. Now, some say that because he was hung in that exact location, it left a lasting imprint, and that is part of the phenomena that also occurs there. So that's obviously one concept. Now, also when we look at residual energy, another theory delves in, just that. It could be the events of great emotional intensity that was again left back and was etched into that land, replaying itself over and over again in certain conditions. This could potentially explain the phenomena like the unseen servant in the big house or even the weeping specter in the quarters. Whereas obviously the historical context goes more into it put an imprint in the land and potentially almost like a doorway for those spirits to walk in my opinion, even haunt the location. With residual, they're basically just doing the same routine over and over again. There is the theory of an intellectual haunting also. Some say that the hauntings go beyond a residual energy, and they even propose that the visitors encounter an intelligent entity, that the spirits may be aware of their surroundings and capable of interaction, which might shed some light to reports of faceless figures and unidentified apparitions. Now, of course, for balance, we must consider the skeptical viewpoint. Could these experiences be the product of, overactive imagination, influenced by the plantation's eerie atmosphere and haunting history? While it does explain all the accounts, it's a theory that has its proponents. Ultimately, Oak Alley remains a place of endless questions and very few concrete answers, a location where the past refuses to be confined to history books, making its presence known in ways both subtle and, for those who've experienced it, profoundly unsettling. Now, given the multitude of accounts and the theories about Oak Alley Plantation, it comes as no surprise that the location has attracted the attention of paranormal researchers. And in this segment, we're going to examine some of the most noteworthy investigations that have sought to either confirm or debunk the haunting phenomena reported at this historical site. Now, many investigations have utilized a range of equipment, everything from infrared cameras to electromagnetic field meters, also known as EMF, in an attempt to capture more concrete evidence of paranormal activity. Now, these instruments are designed to detect anomalies that can be perceived by the human senses. Now, several noteworthy investigations have reported capturing audio anomalies, commonly referred to as EVPs or electric voice phenomena. Some of these EVPs aligned eerily well with the types of account visitors have reported, such as, but not limited to, distant weeping or the sound of footsteps in empty rooms. Now, one recurring observation is that of sudden temperature drops in specific areas of the plantation, most notably in the big house and near the old slave quarters. While some may argue that these are just due to natural causes, the timing and the location of these occurrences often coincide with reports of other paranormal experiences. Now, even though many of us are trying to, if anything, prove these kind of haunted locations, the scientific community, they remain divided on the validations of these investigations. In fact, many critics argue that the methodologies are often flawed or that evidence is anecdotal at best. Yet for those that have experienced the inexplicable of Oak Alley, scientific validation might seem almost unnecessary. Now, while scientific investigations and theoretically the framework offer valuable insight, nothing speaks to the haunting reality of Oak Alley quite like the personal experiences of those who have been there. And I want to kind of dive into some of that. I want to share firsthand accounts from individuals who claim to have had unexplainable encounters at the plantation. When I was doing research on this one blew my mind. There was a visitor that joined a historical tour that was led by a guide who was dressed in period clothing. He was very intrigued by the guide's detailed knowledge. That visitor later asked a staff member about him, only to find out that there was no such guide that was employed there. Now, other visitors, they've also reported similar experiences, which adds yet again another layer to the mystery of Oak Alley. Now, there's multiple accounts that describe a sudden, overpowering scent of perfume in the big house. Often that is accompanied by a drop in temperature. Now, one visitor, upon smelling the fragrance, felt an unexplainable sense of sorrow, as if briefly connected to almost what would be an emotional landscape of the plantation's past. There was also another story where a visitor described taking numerous pictures of the plantation, only to find that the pictures taken in certain areas would not develop correctly. Despite multiple attempts and using different cameras, the issue persisted, leading the visitor to believe that some forces may have been at play. There's also the witness in the mirror, at least that's what they call the story. It's an account that stands out that involves a visitor who, while looking in an antique mirror in the big house, claims to have seen the reflection of a woman standing behind her. When she turned around, it revealed no one. But the experience, it left a lasting impression, making her a firm believer in the plantation's haunting. Now, as is customary in our explanation of the unknown, we reserve a space also for skepticism. It's essential to confront these haunting accounts with rational explanation, and in this segment, I want to explore more of the earthly possibilities behind the phenomena reported at Oak Alley Plantation. Now, many skeptics, they'll talk about the historical weight. I mean, the plantation, its history is heavy, with both stories of hardship and suffering, particularly tied to the slavery aspect. In this context, and their thought process anyway, may amplify the emotional impacts of that visit. But some believers will say, what about the audio and the visual? Well, I think many of the skeptics would say it could just be the creaking of an old building. The play of shadows in the moonlight, or even natural animal sounds could be misinterpreted as potentially paranormal. Acoustics and a little bit of light play, they can play a very deceiving game with the senses. And obviously we cannot forget about confirmation bias. Let's be honest, people tend to seek out evidence that confirm their beliefs while ignoring contradictory data. In the context of a haunting plantation, every unexplained noise or shadow could be interpreted as evidence of a haunting or those who already are inclined to believe. And let's be honest, there's obviously unreliable testimonies. The memory of personal accounts are not always reliable forms of evidence. Over time, stories may be embellished or even altered. Sometimes that makes it difficult to separate fact from fiction. Now, as I draw closer to the conclusion of today's episode, it's crucial that I hear from you. Your input adds an invaluable dimension to our exploration of the Oak Alley Plantation, making it not just a monologue, but a community conversation. Now, I would love to hear from you. If you visited Oak Alley or have thoughts, theories, maybe even firsthand accounts related to this or other haunted locations, I invite you to share them with me. Now, you can do that by visiting my website, www.retracedechos.com. Or you can obviously contact me on my subreddit or my Facebook page by looking up Retraced Echoes. Now, before we move on, I would like to also mention another project that's close to my heart. I co-host a podcast with my friend Nick called Deceptive Reality, which is released every single Friday. If you're intrigued by the unexplained, you'll definitely want to tune in. Again, in any of your favorite locations to listen to podcasts, just look up Deceptive Reality. As we conclude today's episode, we're left at the crossroads of history, human story, and the mysteries that defy straightforward explanation. Oak Alley Plantation serves as a canvas painted with the colors of factual accounts, eyewitness experiences, and the atmospheric weight of its history. Today we examine the background of Oak Alley, we ventured into the first encounters, recounted various ghost stories, and scrutinized theories behind the reported hauntings. We also considered the findings of scientific investigations and pondered the skeptical viewpoints. Now, in my opinion, Oak Alley remains a location where the past seems ever present, providing us with more questions than clear answers. One thing's for certain though, this plantation continues to captivate, unsettle, and intrigue those venturing into its grounds. Now be sure to join me next week as we explore another captivating location. It's your continued interest and engagement that kind of keeps this podcast thriving. So stay tuned and continue questioning the world around you. Again, thank you for joining me in this installment of Retraced Echoes. Until next week, remain vigilant, stay observant, and keep questioning. Goodbye.